Habits define your character. Story by Sarah J. Once, King Alim was sitting among his ministers in his court when a stranger arrived. The man, named Dower, requested a job. The king needed a stable boy, so he asked whether Dower knew about horses. Dower replied that he had never worked with horses before, but since he needed a job, he would manage. The king asked him about his work experience. Dower replied that he had worked as a siyasi before. In Arabic, a siyasi is a mediator who solves the problems of others. The king offered him the job of a stable boy, which he accepted. Dower was a hard-working and honest man. He worked in the stable from morning until late at night. One day, the king visited the stable and asked about his favorite horse. "How is my purebred horse, Rick?" Dower replied, "Your Majesty, Rick is doing well, but he doesn't seem purebred." "How could you say that? I know Rick is purebred." The king spoke harshly and immediately called his old stable boy to inquire about the horse. The man said, "Your Highness, the horse was born purebred, but his mother died during childbirth, so he was raised among our domestic cows." The king asked Dower how he had known the horse wasn't raised among his own breed. Dower replied, "Because of his habits. A horse eats with his head raised after picking food from the ground, but Rick eats only grass with his head down. That's how I knew he was raised among cows." The king appreciated his knowledge and intelligence. He was so pleased that he sent goats and grain to Dower's home and appointed him as a palace manager. One day, the king called Dower into his chamber and asked, "What do you think about the queen?" Dower said, "Accept my apologies, but I will not say a word." The king insisted, "Don't worry, just tell me what you think." Dower answered, "My lord, the queen is not a princess by birth." The king was angered but kept silent. He decided to investigate and visited his mother-in-law, the Queen of Toriban. After hesitation, she revealed, "Before marrying the king, I was a commoner. I was married to a trader and had a daughter with him. After he died, I married the king and had another daughter. The king was overjoyed at her birth, and your father, his dear friend, requested her hand for you. We agreed happily. But before the wedding, our daughter passed away. We didn't want to lose the alliance, so we married off my first daughter instead. She's not a princess by birth. I've carried this guilt for years." The king forgave her. When he returned home, King Alim called Dower and asked how he had known the queen was not a princess. Dower replied, "Because of her behavior toward the servants. A true princess would never be cruel or rude to those who serve her." Impressed, the king gifted Dower cows, goats, and grain. Days later, the king called Dower again and asked, "What do you know about me?" Dower was stunned and pleaded, "My Majesty, please do not ask me that." But the king insisted, "I promise you will not be harmed. Trust me." Dower hesitated, then answered, "My lord, you are not a prince by birth. You have the blood of a shepherd." The king was furious and asked him to leave. He would have punished Dower had he not promised safety. King Alim rushed to his mother's room and demanded the truth. She admitted, "Your uncle wanted the throne, and we had no heir, so we secretly adopted a shepherd's son and presented him as our own to save the kingdom. That child was you." The king called Dower once more and asked how he had known. Dower replied, "When a king is pleased, he gives jewels and pearls. But you give sheep, goats, cows, and grain. That's how I knew you were not a prince by birth." The king asked him to keep the secret and appointed him as his minister. The end.
Like and subscribe to Kidomania.